Wow. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Relational Leadership 911 chat series. I am Charles Jackson, the host, the founder of the Relational Leadership Network, and what a joy it has been to each week sit down and bring our listeners and our viewers and those in our network and really all across the globe, because last week we hit international level. We had people tuning in from all across the globe last year, UK, down in the West Indies, and just really coming together to learn how we can navigate some unprecedented times. It started with COVID-19 and then moved into the civil arrest on the heels of COVID-19. And we want to continue to be able to bring diverse individuals from diverse backgrounds and expertise to talk to us about how to navigate these times. And this week is no different. And so if you found yourself in the midst of all that's going on, a little stress over the remote work environment and making that shift, if you've ever been mentally exhausted from your job and you felt like it drained you more than added to you, if you've struggled with relationships amongst coworkers and from supervisors to peers, and you've been trying to figure out why is it that you feel a certain way about being around certain people, or you're just not uplifted like you would think you would be from being able to work day in and day out amongst folks and fulfill your purpose and your destiny. But don't worry, I got you tonight, because my guest, Jamoul Celey, is here to talk about something that honestly I hadn't heard about until he and I connected, and that is corporate trauma. And so Jamoul is a gifted facilitator specializing in diversity and retention, leadership development and strategic coaching, recruitment and relationships management. Currently, he's the senior program manager at Inroads, and I'm going to have him explain just what that is and what he does through that particular platform and that network. But without further ado, I want to welcome Jamoul to the show. Jamoul, good evening, my brother. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing fine. How you doing, Charles? Pleasure.
Man, I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. I'm excited to have you on the show. I think you're getting ready to tap into a topic that is going to bring a lot of insight for a lot of people who work in the corporate spaces. Whether it was before COVID-19 or after COVID-19, I think we begin to realize how taxing sometimes the corporate environment can be if we are honest. And I know we all love our jobs, right? And we love the people that we work with for the most part. That's why we stay with the companies we're with. But sometimes we can be mentally and emotionally drained and not sure what's going on. And from our initial conversation, I think you're going to be able to unpack some of those things for us. So I'm excited to have you. And real quick
Excellent.
before we start our conversation, as always, we want this to be a discussion. So those who tune in, come on, let us know where you're tuning in from, what type of work you're engaged in. Let Jamoul know if he's hitting on the topics that are relevant to you. Pop your questions in the chat. I'll pop them on the screen for him to be able to see, and we can respond to those live. But we want this to be interactive. So give us a thumbs up, smash those hearts, share with anybody that you know in the corporate space, because I think this is going to be an amazing topic. Jamoul, you ready, sir?
I'm ready.
All
Thank
right.
you, Charles.
Before we
Mm.
even get too far in the weed of things, just let us know a little bit about yourself, man, and what you do, and a little bit about Inroads and the work that you do through that before we even get a little further, if you would, please.
Absolutely. Charles, I'm a corporate professional. I have been so since I graduated college. I've been in the public and private workspace, working a myriad of positions in firms for the last 20 some odd years.
Okay.
Presently, I do a lot of work with a organization that I hold beloved to my heart. Is Inroads, and I'm also thoroughly entrenched into my community
Okay.
in the city that I live in Boston, working with a beautiful organization that is also dear to my heart, Youth Guidance and BAM, Becoming a Man, where I
Mm,
get to sit down with young men. I get to sit down with 30% of the uh, population, but 100% of the future when it comes to the building the next generation of corporate professionals. But in all, if I could just encapsulate everything that I've done, everything that I do, I'm just a success coach. I'm interested in helping people find their greatness. So that is the best way to define who I am and what I do professionally.
man, that's awesome. all of that time seemed like both of your positions really align with working with the youth and our next generation. Is that correct? Even
Absolutely.
with, okay, man, I mean, we need that because as we see, I think, and not to get too far ahead of myself, but with everything that's going on with COVID-19 and then the civil unrest, we're noticing how that younger generation, right, the Gen X, not the Gen X's, but the Gen Zs, the millennials, they are really engaged, man, like in these activities that are going on all over the place. They're not shy, they're speaking out, they're leading the
That's correct.
charge, and I
That's
think it's a
correct.
testament to individuals like yourself who have prepared them and groomed them to do those things. So hats off to you, my brother.
Absolutely. This generation is unlike any other generation that we've ever produced. They are not afraid. They are fully informed. They have the world and the access to information in the palm of their hands. And they have looked at the previous generations and have strategically really economized and cross-referenced what worked and what hasn't worked. And they are standing on their soapbox and they are making their voices heard. It's a
Absolutely.
beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah, yeah, man. Totally agreed. So, corporate trauma, just
Yes.
where did it come from? What made you coin that phrase, corporate trauma? Kind of first, just let us know what is corporate trauma and how did you come about coining that phrase?
Well, I coined the phrase, just with working with a lot of different people, helping them out, find their way professionally with professional development, coaching, and training. Um, and when you enrich other people's lives with your experiences and you help them navigate and navigate around the pitfalls that you've fallen into, and then they still find new and more inventive ways to get stuck, I had to ask myself a question, what was really the issue?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the vernacular that I heard was, I don't know what happened, Jamal. Man, this came out of left field. I was blindsided. And just putting a clinical lens to it, I said, man, these are impactful events. Did it happen all of a sudden, or was it over time? Is there a pattern of things?
Mm-hmm.
So just from gleaning off the experiences of those that I've been able to help throughout my career, I coined corporate trauma to be provocative, but
Mm-hmm.
it is in fact a physiological, psychological, emotional disruption or damage as a result of negative interactions in the workplace. And this is either sustained small interactions over time, or this could be a significant one, like COVID-19, where I'm relegated to my living room away from human interaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's usually involving a performance environment that includes stakeholders and competitors. And then it also is a passive trauma because it is within the corporate industrial complex where a lot of people go every day and condition themselves to create a livelihood for them and their families. So it's something that's incremental and it sneaks up on you. That's why I related it to the word trauma,
Mm-hmm.
uh, just based on experiences from other people.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you mentioned how it could be a significant event like COVID-19, or it can be things over time. What are some of the examples of how over time, all of a sudden,
Yes.
I'm getting to this place that I'm experiencing? Can you talk to that piece?
Absolutely. The common denominator in any situation is you.
Okay.
And so when you go into your workplace and you are trying to be excellent and perform in your field of endeavor,
Mm-hmm.
and you are noticing a pattern of behavior, either with a particular avoidance to difficulty or with a specific personality type, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
or when you come to the point where you've reached your capacity based on time or whether it's related to a knowledge base that you may have acquired to perform your duties. What starts to happen is there's a specific pattern of things that starts to happen, and the symptoms that I've been able to identify is really fear, stress, anger, depression, frustration, and then that tricky the last symptom is cognitive dissonance, where you have decided to be something very unique and different to who you normally are by default. and able to enable yourself to be successful and perform in the workplace because you're tied to a paycheck or you're tied to a livelihood that you have
Mm,
to produce your needs. So these coping mechanisms that come along with it, these defense mechanisms that come along with it, start to pile on to your psyche in the way of somebody digging a hole for themselves, and then before you know it, right, you can
yeah.
barely see the the other side of the hole because you have just done it incrementally over time, and this affects relationships at work. This affects how you relate to your family. If you're blessed to have children, and your tolerance with really remembering why you are doing what you're doing.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I've noticed most is the death of the entrepreneurial spirit, which makes anybody successful in a career, a job, or a personal endeavor that they are trying to get success out of.
Right.
And so that's an example of some of the sustained habitual patterns that could be contributed to corporate trauma.
Brother, thank you for your patience
Yes.
working around that. Thank you to all those who were on with us who might have dropped off earlier. We kind of redirected ourselves and we are back live. So I have Jamal here with me. Jamal and I were discussing corporate trauma.
Right.
And before we got disconnected, Jamal, you had talked about some of the defense mechanisms. You talked about some of the warning signs, what kind of brings it on as far as, corporate trauma. And
Right.
and we were getting ready to go into a discussion about, we were talking about how some of the stuff that happens over time builds up and what we begin
Yes.
when we're experiencing corporate trauma as far as because it's been going on for so long, some of those signs and symptoms. So let's pick up the conversation right there.
Yes. So what I was getting into was one of my observations is that the warning signs is also the residual effects. And how could those two things exist at the same time? Because usually when you realize that you are a victim of corporate trauma, you're already in it.
Mm,
And sometimes the signs, right, is the residual effects of it. Some of the signs: low confidence. Man, how could you be great at your job one day, great at your career one day, and then all of a sudden, right, that's you're the same person, you have the same capacity, you have the same talent, and then you come into work the next day and you just don't feel like you're cutting it. Job hasn't changed, career path hasn't changed. You've evolved with some of the innovations, but your confidence is low, right?
okay.
And then what comes with, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then what comes with low confidence is low self-esteem. Now, because I haven't had a win in a while, because I haven't picked up on my confidence, now my ability to grasp the possibility of me being a top performer in this space has dwindled. And then now you become isolated, right? And then I'm a Black man in corporate America, and sometimes when you're isolated and you become antisocial, that could be picked up as unprofessional, and you're trying to fix it. Now you're the last one to work, first one to leave, right? Self-medicating. Any downtown urban area office building is littered with comfort food restaurants and bars all the way around it. So there's plenty of things that you can use to mitigate some of these circumstances. But if you find yourself low confidence, low self-esteem, you find yourself in a pattern of self-medicating, isolated, then you have, and then you that also famous last one in, first one out, especially at a job that you really, or a career or a field of endeavor that you were really getting a lot of fulfillment out of, you, my friend, could be in the midst of corporate trauma and its effects.
Mm, yeah, that makes sense, man. You know, when you were talking about low confidence, low self-esteem, kind of losing interest almost, right? Is it safe to say that productivity is falling, and my engagement is falling? And that's only going to lead to more trauma because now people are going to notice it, right? Maybe the
Right.
opportunities aren't being extended, the relationships now starting to be affected. And if somebody or someone doesn't intervene or something doesn't change, then you could get to the point where, you lost your job when really it wasn't that you lost your ability to do your job or you're no longer that top performer that everybody was going to. Those skills are still there. They're just being buried underneath all of the trauma, right?
Exactly.
Either physical, emotional abuse, or that sort of self-defeat mindset, or just kind of surviving versus striving and walking in fear. Your gifts and your talents are just being covered up by all of that, right? And so I know I've been,
Absolutely.
yeah, and been in those environments where I've seen that. So let's talk about social isolation. So social and physical isolation can lead to some dark thoughts, right, and mental breakdowns. What can we do right now to prevent and overcome the chronic isolation we're kind of all experiencing due to the pandemic? Because it's easy right now to be isolated and to be traumatized because people may be a little short with you. You're just communicating via email all the time. You're not able to get that personal interaction. And so that can affect that sort of social connection that we used to get from cooler talks and boardroom conversations and whiteboard sort of planning. So what does the isolation going to do to us, and how can we prevent, from having trauma due to being isolated right now?
One of the most important factors to remember right now is exactly that. Remember who you are as a professional. Everything that you needed to be successful, you were actually born with. Those factors, those variables, those characteristics have been nurtured over time, just like corporate trauma is nurtured over time. Your strengths, your aptitudes are nurtured over time based on experiences, based on circumstances that mine these things out of you. And overcoming difficulty is one of the greatest ways to remember who you are. And so just some self-reflection. There's nothing better to do while you're isolated than to self-reflect, even if it's just a few minutes at a time. And the solutions to corporate trauma are all proactive ones, right? These are some of the solutions that I prescribe for corporate trauma have always been a proactive look at it, right? You got a plan. All right, what's your plan for your job? You may have a position that you plan on being there forever. What's the next move? What goals do you set, short-term, long-term, to get there? Work-life integration, right? People always say work-life balance. But if you can't integrate what you're doing professionally with who you are when you're not at work, then you have to do some soul searching and take a real long look, because when stuff gets hard, if you are cognitively dissonance between who you are at work and who you are at home, then you're your prime candidate. So I like to prescribe work-life integration, critical thinking, critical analysis.
I mean, Jamoul, expound
Say
on
that again.
I say expound on that for us.
So I came up in corporate America. I worked retail, customer service, banking, right? And it was all about for-profit, the bottom line. How can I take my skills and talents to impact the organization's or company's bottom line, right? Because I had transferable skill sets. But what motivated me to get up to go to work every day was the interaction with people, helping them, developing them. And when I looked at my personal life, I was doing that on my own, for free, for friends, for relatives, players that played basketball for me. I was the guy that said, all right, you need a place to stay for 2 weeks. Come on, I'll take care of you while your mom is on vacation in Europe. You can stay with me. I was that type of guy. But I'm like, how can I be this individual at home and get so much fulfillment, but I'm getting paid to do something completely different? So when I started to integrate who I was, who I am at home and at work, I started to get paid for it. Okay. Right. And then now I'm reflecting, man, these are the things that I used to get in trouble for when I was back at school, because somebody told me, hey, you're disturbing the class because you talk too much, you class clown. Hey, but now I can get in front of people and I can engage in an audience in content that may be a little bland. So I have work-life integration, right? And to get there, I had to think critically. All right, Jamoul, who are you? What are you? Where are you? Why are you? How are you? Why now? these are all, things that are based on critical analysis. And once you get a thorough understanding of who you are, now you need boundaries, because I'm good at what I do. I'm versatile. People are going to tap into me, tap into my talent to get me to be versatile in a realm that may not necessarily be squarely my talent, what I want to do. But because I'm good at it, they can use that to benefit themselves. So I had to learn the art of no. I had to give boundaries, right? And then once I did all of that, I started to think about, and what your audience can think about is using those things that they love to now, in fact, inform and impact to produce what you need. So now I can eat, giving life to other people through professional development, because that's what I really want to do. That's who I am. And the individual that strategically balances these 4 or 5 solutions is widely known as the servant leader. Okay. And servant leadership is the answer to corporate trauma, especially in a crisis like what we're in today. You need somebody leading the department, leading the organization. They may not necessarily be the CEO, but you need that personality up front, thinking about the individual and placing them in spaces to be successful, which may not necessarily always align with the bottom line immediately. But when you have expert staff who love what they do, they will go above and beyond, because they have tapped into using what they love to produce what they need. And only a servant leader with the mind and the heart for the people that make up the organization can really create that type of culture that is necessary for a time like today. I really, really, really am passionate and believe in that, which is like the opposite end of the spectrum that corporate trauma exists on.
Yeah, that's so powerful, man. Because I mean, you said a lot, and I want to impact a little bit of it. You first started, talking about how, and in the simplest form I can put it, is finding ways for, if you found yourself kind of drained and like null to sleep almost with your own job and place where you're at, and that routine, sort of monotony of it all, it may be one of those things where you haven't necessarily truly aligned purpose and sort of daily pursuits with passion, right? Like what's actually fueling you. Because deep on the inside, like we all can go and use our skills, like you say, to do a certain thing, right? And it may be a little bit robotic, but when those things align with something that actually excites you, comes from within, that you feel is valuable, meaningful, and serves others, you've taken yourself to a different place, a place where it's much more easier to combat corporate trauma, right? Because now your daily agenda is not to get up and just fulfill a task. It's to serve, right? Through fulfilling your passions and pursuing those passions. And so, I mean, that's perfect. I've never heard anybody say work-life integration and kind of explain it like that. So that was the first thing.
Yeah, you go from being a task rabbit, no disrespect to the app, I love the app, right? to being an insatiable, indispensable resource and talent, right? And now that entrepreneurial spirit that I talked to earlier in the other segment before we had technical difficulty is burning really bright. And you can go, you can be an FTE, a full-time employee somewhere, and you can be an entrepreneur. You can take that same entrepreneurial spirit, burn it bright, right? And it's insatiable, and you can bring life to an organization, or you could take your talents and build something for yourself. But the one thing you won't is be vulnerable to external factors that the external factors that corporate trauma thrives off of. It's like the bacteria in dark, moist, damp environments. That's what corporate trauma is.
Man. And so being a servant leader now, because you say it's almost like the antidote, the remedy to this all. And you say during this time right now of thinking social isolation and physical isolation, even though socially we still need to interact with individuals, but we need that physical separation just for the sake of keeping us safe. But companies kind of, we are all like all over the place right now, right? We're not connected like we used to be, and we're trying to figure this thing out. There's a lot of things that has created the separation, not just the pandemic, but the civil unrest, right? Because people are starting to choose sides, and I don't like the way this group is handling it, and you seem to align with that group's belief, and so I shun you, right? And so there's more things right now, to me, that are causing separation amongst us, even employees who used to work side by side, right? Just because more of the talks that we're having about civil unrest and your opinions and views, like, I didn't know you felt that way. And now that I do, man, I kind of feel some way. And so saying stuff to people through emails and on calls, and it can really traumatize us. So what can servant leaders do to make sure that those individuals who are working from home and losing that connection, trying to navigate this civil unrest that we're having and respond appropriately to all of the injustices, like what do we need from our servant leaders? What should they be doing?
Precisely, in my opinion, in my judgment, what we need from servant leadership right now is for them to tap into that servitude leadership to produce a safe space in these environments, right? People are allowed to feel the way that they feel. People are allowed to have the opinions that they have, right? But what we get in trouble because sometimes we are feeding off of each other's residual effects of corporate trauma. And a lot of organizations now are struggling to survive. And then the bigger ones that are in better shape are trying to figure out ways, how do I grab more market share? How do I take over right now, right? And you putting a lot of weight on those in the spaces to execute whatever good service or mission that you're pushing. And the environment is unsafe because what's going on outside of the organization's mission and purpose is civil unrest. It's COVID-19, right? And so these things bring about circumstances and feelings and emotions that these individuals that are working in these spaces should and need to have a safe space to articulate these things. So when I was growing up, going through college, and I remember, my onboarding process is people in professional development telling me, leave all that stuff at the door. When you come to work, right? You got a job to do.
You got a job to do. Keep your problems at home, right?
Exactly. And I believed it. I took that advice, hook, line, and sinker. And then I got smacked in the face. Man, the same guy I'm at home is the same one who came to work today. And even though I may not say anything, it's not possible to leave it at the door. It's not possible to leave it at home. Only my professional acumen and my maturity as an individual will help me mitigate those circumstances and deal with those things and also be a professional. But I need a servant leadership to produce an environment where it's all right to be mindful. Can I take a break?
Yeah.
Right? Can I go take a walk? Do I have to answer this email right now because it makes your life more convenient? Are you able to notice the circumstances like you talked about earlier? The productivity is falling off. Mm-hmm. Is this an opportunity for performance management and managing people out? Or is this an opportunity to coach and give people permission to not be perfect? And see, that's what servant leadership is, and some people it comes natural, right? But you can be taught. You can slow down. Or if that's just not your cup of tea, somebody on your team. Somebody is. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to give up your privileged position as CEO or COO. Man, just tap Charles on the shoulder. Hey, Charles, I need some help here. Can you be the face of this initiative for the department? Because I believe that the organization would value your leadership on this mission right here. Because look, the people are in need of some refreshing perspective to help get us through this difficult time. Yeah. That's what servant leadership does.
Yeah, that's spot on, man. And that's what at the Relational Leadership Network, I mean, that's the premise that we stand on. That's the foundation that we have built the network on, that when relational leaders are in essence, they're servants. There's They're authentic, they serve, and they serve without even seeking things in return the majority of the time, right? Even though they're probably a compensation because they're in a position of leadership or there's rewards, but they're not necessarily after that. They're literally looking at how can I make the lives of those who I'm in charge of or over or leading better, whether it's career advancement, their mental health, the relationships amongst the team, the opportunities that I'm giving them. I'm looking to add value, right? And bring people from where they are to like this next level in their life, all while being mindful of their mental, emotional, and physical health. And it does take you being more in tune to others than yourself to actually serve in that way. And sometimes, what are ways that, and, leaders add to corporate trauma? Because
Yeah.
I think that is, at the end of the day, a lot of people leave their jobs. And, when I read the stats, it's not necessarily because of the pay. It's because of an immediate supervisor. So how do
Right.
leaders affect corporate trauma and what role do they play in that?
Leaders, man, especially today's corporate leader or a leader in leadership anywhere, got a lot on your shoulders,
Mhm.
right? We are an aggressive marketplace. Corporate America has evolved into global America, right? Where you just had one time zone 50 years ago to be concerned with. Maybe, there's three. There's multinational implications to decisions that you make, from your headset and iPhone. And that's a lot of pressure. And sometimes leaders don't see the immediate benefit in being servant oriented for the best interest of their employees because of time. We don't have time, right? We have to take advantage of this opportunity right now. And as a former leader in some spaces, I understand that. So what I would and this type of pressure is then snowballed downhill onto middle management, right?
Yeah.
Upper middle management, and then those that are on the front line. And then now you have to take on a superioric, hard exterior that is devoid of emotion, because running business and being involved with people's emotions come from two different sides of the brain, and it comes from two different aspects of the professional.
Mhm.
And if I'm going to be concerned with growth and sustainability, I may not be able to be focused on your feelings right now, right? So they put pressure on, and now because I look up to this leader, maybe I am going to do the same thing. Maybe I'm going to take on that exterior, and that is completely unauthentic. And so now you have people trying to be what they think is going to reflect success based on the tone and the speed that leadership has set for them. And we have to compartmentalize. We have to understand and really break down whose role is which, and not be so ready to attack the leader as a person. Question the idea,
Yeah.
right? Because that questioning the idea is going to embark a conversation to happen. And when that conversation happens, that's where the meeting of the minds, that's where the solution takes place, when both opposing opinions and perspectives are now out front in a safe environment. That's what has to happen.
Some of the comments and we're being mindful of others is the key. Creating opportunities instead of obstacles. Michelle Andrews said, and she also agreed that people leave managers, not companies. And
Right.
Pierre Campbell had asked, how can corporate leaders identify and handle corporate trauma in this new normal of telework? And I think you kind of alluded, hit on that actually a few seconds ago, but did you want to elaborate on that question?
Yes, you have to check on your people. You have to reassure them that, this lack of social interaction due to social distancing, and you being relegated to, a lot of people being relegated to home offices, living rooms, man caves, right? She sheds. My wife wants a she shed, right? So they have completely customized spaces that are designed to give them refuge into workspaces, and now they're bringing that other person home. You got to, that they have been trained
to leave
at work, right? So now, and you leave, and you let this person come home and run rampant amongst their family and friends, right? When it was only 8 hours a day in some other place where the family was not. And so you got to check on your people. You got to make sure. And I'll be the first one to admit that I'm working more hours now that I'm virtual in a lot of ways than I was when I was on the go.
Okay.
So you got to check on your people. You have to provide boundaries and spaces. Recognition is at an all-time high as far as being in demand. You got to recognize your people for what they're doing. Civil unrest and COVID-19. As a leader, you got to be thinking something happened.
Yeah.
Like we got names to it, COVID-19 and civil unrest, but that may not be to you what it is to somebody. Jamoul at home with his family. So you got to say, hey man, something happened. Let me check on Jamoul. Let me provide this safe space. Let me take the foot off the gas a little bit. Let me make things a bit more efficient. And what will happen is people will be given permission to be themselves, and they'll run through a brick wall for you. I'm a firm believer that we could do more and be more successful with the appreciation of people and what they bring to the table and giving them permission to be themselves than we were forcing them into a box.
Yeah. Do you think that when organizations are silent about what's going on, that they know is affecting a particular group within their ranks, that it leads to trauma? Is that, over time?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Say you have an organization that has never acknowledged that, there's disparities amongst the minority groups within their company. There's no Blacks in leadership, or there's not a lot of women who get to, hold high level leadership positions, right? And it doesn't get talked about, it doesn't get acknowledged. People are being killed in the street, and they're just, oh, what are we going to do for our clients today? And just don't acknowledge it. Can that be traumatizing?
That can be very traumatizing. Ironically, I had a corporate leader who is executive leadership in their firm reach out to me because we know each other from some previous work and said, Jamoul, I would like to have your advice. I am trying to broach this subject matter of making our environment a safe space, which we took a survey. It's already, our employees think it's a safe space to be who they are, but we want to sustain that. Mm-hmm. And so I've been bringing up COVID-19 civil unrest. And one of the executive leaders said to this individual that is a personal associate of mine, that, hey, you're trying to make a discussion from a problem that does not exist in this organization. And that shows you the level of disconnect, right? Mm-hmm. That is possible. And so, like I said, my work towards corporate trauma is proactive, right? It's got to be proactive because it's going to sneak up on you. So this individual was trying to do the same thing under undescribed, uncertain terms. I'm giving it certain terms, corporate trauma.
Right.
And the reaction is, from the other executive leader was, I don't want to have this conversation. Wow. Because nobody's talking about it. And if I don't bring it up, we don't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
That's just a devoid of tools and the ability to have that conversation. And so that's just training. That's just a knowledge share. That's just having the heart of a servant leader that can settle that person's anxiety and give them the ability to have that conversation, to be proactive, so that what you just described, the trauma of silence, not existing within this firm, right? And I would say that is probably true in a lot of spaces right now, Charles.
So if an organization is looking back saying, well, I don't think we have that issue within our ranks, then there's a lot of blinders up. And the first thing they should do is find a way to get a pulse of how
Right.
people are viewing either their conscious or unconscious biases and their own kind of prejudices, stereotypes, their own sort of racism that they have that they don't even think they have. Like there's ways to get a pulse as whether or not your company is there and where they sit with that, and whether or not people feel like their company is doing enough. You got to really just, before you jump in, I hear you say, do a pulse and see where your people stand first, so you know the right approach to take. Right.
Right.
You might
Absolutely.
rally everybody together and start being activists, but you might also need to start with uncovering and really shedding some insight on what biases are and the unconscious biases that we have. And so that's a great point. I see
Yes.
here is, what are some suggestions to ERGs started within, so employee resource groups started within organizations? My company has taken the approach of being silent. My company could definitely do more. So some suggestions for employee resource groups.
You need some disruptors,
Mm-hmm.
right? I wouldn't suggest at all that anybody within an organization do anything counterproductive to what the firm is trying to accomplish, put themselves in jeopardy. If they can't afford to extend the social capital, right, the financial capital to be the disruptor. But there's ways to doing that. Bring in somebody from the outside. There's a brother who I studied briefly just recently, Dr. Ibrahim Kendi, who talked about, you brought up racism, right? Racism is a big topic right now. And some of the basis of his work is saying it's not enough to not be racist. You have to be anti-racist. Now let's take that a step further. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And we have to be uncomfortable with the uncomfortable, because growth happens in that space. We can't force uncomfortability on people. We just have to broach the subject, and how it hits that individual or the group of individuals is about them.
Yeah.
So you need disruptors to kind of raise the volume in the silence. Employee resource groups, you got to bring people in, right? You got to bring people in to demonstrate and simulate what a safe space really is, so that then it can ripple into the organization through those that belong to the employee resource group. That's what I would encourage.
Yeah.
I mean, and these conversations have to happen, and that we learn through the example of others. Like it's a proud professional aspect of what I offer, by being able to go in an organization and like totally be myself, be a clown, right? Because I'm comfortable. I don't have any insecurities with who I am professionally. I'm not going to do anything to hurt my brand intentionally, but I'm not going to be somebody else, right? And I'm not going to act like that what's going on did not affect me. So just that type of attitude is enough of a disruption to even just get a conversation started. And then from there, you can build based on the information and data that you receive back after starting that ripple with disrupting.
Yeah, because ultimately what you're trying to do is create a new culture, right? You're trying to make it where the culture is one that is inclusive. The culture is one that looks to serve. The culture is one that, sort of people over profit. Yeah, you need profits to survive, but if the people aren't healthy and the people aren't showing up with, bringing their whole self to work and bringing their A game, then you're not going to make the profits that you want to make. And so you got to take care of the people. And that's a culture, right? Where folks will look at it and say, this is just how we do things around here. We look at another. We put our personal feelings aside to learn about one another and accept differences. And that's culture, right? To ask you how you're doing and how this is affecting you, and then create groups where we can come in on mass levels and do that, which will then trickle down to the individuals doing the same thing. So,
and it's just not honest, right? If that doesn't exist, it's just not honest, right? You're not, and man, you cannot exist and sustain without those that are in the trenches, on the front line, pulling it together. If they're not coming back with real information and being honest with you, you're in for, a downfall eventually. So we need that. We need that type of honesty.
Absolutely, man.
Mm-hmm.
Jamoul, what should corporations know and do in regards to protecting their employees from corporate trauma? And I saw Pierre even asked, how can we hold them accountable, right? And what would be the benefits?
See, accountability is complicated. You know, some people relate accountability to shifting and deflecting blame on the individual that's impacting them in a certain way. So corporations have to really be connected to the fact that accountability is a two-way mirror, right? Okay. Both sides can see themselves and also each other. So if I'm accountable to not allowing corporate trauma to exist, then what is the reciprocal agreement with those that are in position as associates, as professionals on the front line that make my organization go? And those things can exist with really stringent job descriptions or roles and defined roles, or you can allow people to fit within the guidelines that you present to them, but flourish and be themselves and allow creativity to take place. Now you're accountable for the result. You're not making people create positive and favorable results for you by carving them into a square peg and then trying to fit them into a round hole.
Yeah.
There has to be a level of understanding and accountability for these corporations to understand that a company legally is a entity with an identity and an ID number of its own, but starts with the people.
Mm-hmm.
It is the people. And it ends with the people. So you can be as inanimate in your head about the company as a leader or as a corporation's personality or culture as you want, but you're gonna be boomerang right back to the fact that this is a group of people with a real living and breathing personality that's trying to exist in a space that's going to benefit everybody. So that accountability is that two-way mirror that you can see yourself and each other on both sides.
Yeah. I love that, man. So if you had to, look in the camera and speak to an individual about their current state, physical, mental, and emotional state working in corporate America when it comes to trauma, protecting themselves from it, knowing what to look for and then what to do, what would you say to that individual? What would you do? What would you have them know? A better way to put it right now.
First and foremost, you're right. You are experiencing something. You are experiencing something that is bringing out of you what you're feeling. Okay. Right? Number two, 9 times out of 10, probably 9.9 times out of 10, you are not alone. There's someone else in similar circumstances that feel and may have reacted the same way that you do. And there's no amount of pressure. There's no amount of obstacle that you can't provide an answer and a solution to if given the opportunity to express how you feel with the objective circumstances and information that and the reality of the situation. If that's expressed, man, we can get to the solution.
Yeah.
But we can't continue to isolate and think I'm the only one that feels this way and something's wrong with me because I do.
That's good.
No, that's you know, so that's what I would say to an individual. And look at the symptoms of corporate trauma. Are you stressed? Are you in fear? Yeah, I call it courage under fire. You going to work every day building up courage to not get fired. Because if I actually said what was on my mind, right? I got to update that CV. I got to update that resume.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So those are the two things. And then whatever your learning style is, whatever the whatever your personality attracts as far as how you express yourself and articulate how you're feeling, you got to do that. If you got to write it down, if you got to talk it out, if you got to talk to somebody, if you got to vent, get the irrational, emotional part out of the way so that you can get to the objective solution and reality of the situation.
Yeah, man, that's really good. And in turn, speak to our corporations and talk to them about how they will benefit, right, from addressing the corporate trauma that can creep into the workspaces, and really, because ultimately, it is a business and they're trying to make money, and hopefully everybody within the business is able to benefit from the money that comes in. The more money that comes in, hopefully there's raises and bonuses and more leadership roles that people can take. So what do corporations need to know, and companies need to know about the financial profits that can come from addressing corporate trauma and really hitting it head on?
If you can produce, as an organization, if you produce a safe environment where corporate trauma does not exist, it's going to take time, right? It's not going to take as much time as you think, because everybody's looking at that next quarter, that next quarter output, that yearly report. I get it. However, if you just take time and do the research, because the information is out there on how to do these things. We don't have time tonight in this conversation to go over all of that from an organizational standpoint, right? You will find it difficult to get rid of the people that work for you, because they will run through a brick wall for you. They'll stay. I can almost guarantee they will do more for less, because the statistics show that people find value in being fulfilled more than in their paycheck. That is true. Right. There is a commonality and idealism running through everybody that gets up every day and decides to do something for themselves in service of others.
Right.
And that's what these organizations, I don't care what you're in. You could be a public accounting firm, or you could be a county jail, right? You are performing a service for other people. That product is going to hit other people at a certain point. And these individuals will bend over backwards to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
Right. If you can tap into that and find what inspires and motivates people. And it's not as hard as you think, and it doesn't take as much time as you would calculate.
Man, that's been so good, brother. That is so good. This whole discussion, has been really good and really enriching for me. Again, as one who is in that corporate space, some of the warning signs that you shared with us earlier before we got disconnected, the things to look out for, ways to combat it. It's real critical right now, especially that corporations are aware of these things, because we're so disassociated right now, almost because of what's going on, that it can lead to a lot of trauma, right? A lot of traumatic and things that will be lasting. You talked about the longevity of these things, that some of it won't be hard to get over overnight, because it's been building up and been going on so long. And before you realize it, you have this breakdown and this huge disconnect if it's not something that we are constantly focused on. So I really appreciate all the insight, man. This has been really powerful. We like to end all of our broadcasts, and when anytime we get the opportunity to speak with a leader, we're asking them the same 4 questions. And we call them our lead questions, because the first word of each question starts with a letter that makes up the word lead, L-E-A-D. And so if you've shared your heart, man, and you're ready, before we close out and I let you go this evening, I would like to dive into our lead questions. Are you ready, bro?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Bring some insight. And it's kind of like rapid fire, what comes to mind when I ask these questions. Your answers don't have to start with the letters, just my questions will. So, all right, the L in lead. So learn. During your years of leadership, what lesson have you learned that's impacted you the most?
The lesson that I've learned that has impacted me the most is that not everybody thinks like I do. And one of the things that will be stoked in me would be frustration, which is really filtered down into anger. and that everybody doesn't see the world through the lens that I do, but only through the recognition of who I am and other people and how we fit together and how we're compatible, was when I really understood, what teamwork really was, what collective responsibility, and going after the same goal. That was the hugest learning that I had to remember. I had to give myself permission to be who I was, because I realized everybody doesn't think that way. And and when you don't realize that, you get confused and angry because how come this person doesn't see it this way? Doesn't everybody see it that way? The answer is absolutely, emphatically no. Right. So once I learned that and understood the beauty of diversity of thought and mind and experience, man, it really opened my eyes and created my capacity and increased my capacity to be of service and learn more and be a better professional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, man. Not everyone thinks like me. The E is for expectation. What do you think is the number one thing that people expect from a leader?
The number one thing that I think people expect from a leader is something that is rarely recognized until somebody says it. And this is what I'm getting ready to say. You're not going to really understand what you're looking for in a leader until you come up on one that gives you permission to be yourself and to be led. Hey, Jamal, I love what you bring to the table. You are unique. And this is how I'm going to use what you bring to the table to incorporate it in what we're trying to accomplish. And if you hold up your end of the bargain, we are going to be successful. That's what people are looking for in leadership. More than vision, more than guidance, more than the fact that they may know more or not, right?
Yeah.
Can I coexist and not feel less than?
Right.
Can I coexist and not feel inferior because we have a different pay scale, different title? Yeah. Is this individual interested in who I am and what I bring to the table, which in fact gives me permission to be myself, which is a A1 anecdote to corporate trauma. That's what people look for in leadership. They may not recognize it.
But when they find a leader that gives them the permission to be themselves, they are like, wow.
And where have you been all my life?
It's missing from their life, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, man, I love that. So the A is for acceptance. What do you think new leaders, so just coming into a leadership position, what do you think new leaders need to accept when stepping into their leadership role?
That these are unprecedented times for those that are in leadership. There are swift consequences to every decision, and there are swift rewards. And these are times unlike any other time that we have in recorded history. So settle your criteria and your expectations, and expect the unexpected, and get used to learning on the fly. You may even have to build a plane while it's flying, right? You have and once those expectations are realized, then you will be a more flexible leader that can lead in any environment, in any circumstance, in any situation, especially a crisis.
That's good. D is for decisions. Is there a blueprint that you personally follow when making decisions, Jamal?
I love the round table approach.
Okay.
If I'm in a choir, I can sing longer with the choir than I can as a solo artist. So when we create that round table and I give my piece, I may blow your mind with my intellect, with my wisdom. But when you add on to that, and we can create a circle or a cipher of sorts at a round table, everybody's empowered, and the strength of the note that is being sang can go longer and can be louder in concert with each other than me by myself. Leadership does not mean, they always say it's lonely at the top. Like, okay, however, that you are at the top of something.
Right.
Don't forget everything else, right? Yeah. So So making decisions, I have to include other people. Even if I'm by myself, what would Charles think? You know, what have I learned from Charles?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I'm involving you, you
Yeah.
know, and so those are the decisions. And then sometimes decisions are, especially for servant leadership, you may have to make a decision that is the best for the most people, leaving some out. But in the end, it's going to pay off because you took everybody into consideration.
Yeah. That's so good because you get that diversity of thought, right? Decisions are not one-sided, right? You're going to make better decisions. And that's a great blueprint to include, right? And then knowing your team and allowing their influence to even something you said I thought was pretty powerful, even in those where you've now taken all of their input and then you got to go into a place and make a decision on ultimately on your own, but it wasn't really on your own because you remember, you know, Jamoul talks about this and Sarah once said this and so it still affects how you make that decision, even when the ultimate decision is up to you. It really wasn't because you allowed yourself to take that input from those and allow them to influence you is what I hear you saying, right? So
right. And then everybody can pallet to decision because they know you did it with them in mind.
right.
You know, and ultimately it's the most correct decision because it impacts everybody.
It affects everybody. It's not
Right.
just for one. Man,
Right.
that's so good. My brother, this has been great. I enjoyed the discussion. I enjoyed hanging out with you.
Yes.
5 minutes, an hour. So I wanted to give us more time because we got cut off. So I was really intentional about just letting it flow, man. And I'm glad I did because there's so much here to impact. And I was trying to take notes while talking with you and, you know, lead this discussion. But man, it was really good. I want to thank you for your time. Let folks know how they can connect with you if they needed to, if they have follow-up questions, wanted to just, you know, pick your brain about their own personal trauma or maybe even get you in to speak to their team. How can we connect with you?
Please find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find me. Find me on LinkedIn under my name, Jamoul Celey. It's the only Jamoul on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And Celey is spelled like celery without the R. So I'm right up there. You can directly message me and email me from LinkedIn. I'm going to have some things coming down the pike that will expand my reach in a few short days. That can make it a lot easier for people to get a hold of me. But right now, that LinkedIn page is really what you can use to get in contact with me, and we can continue this conversation. But if the corporate trauma concept has impacted you specifically, go to corporatetrauma.blog. It's a very smooth landing page with just a couple of sequential pages and the ability to leave some commentary on there and talk about your own story. You can be anonymous if you want. Give me some information that I can glean from to help more people. And that's corporatetrauma.blog, or you can hit me up directly. I will call you, email you, text you in response right from my LinkedIn. And that's Jamoul. And Celey is Celey, or celery without the R.
Okay. I threw it in the chat. So we got your LinkedIn profile there, corporatetrauma.blog there as well. Thank you, my brother. I hope this is just the first of many conversations as we continue this video podcast series and then other future series that we run. This will be a topic that will remain relevant. I want to thank all of those who tuned in, those who came.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
And stayed with us during this time. I hope it was impactful. And as always, stay safe, but stay together, because if we stay together, we can come out on the other side of this pandemic and this crisis that we're experiencing right now stronger, because crises are not uncommon to man, but the courage required to lead a family, a nation, an organization, community, whoever, through a crisis, that is uncommon. And we are trying to equip you with that courage. Jamoul, thanks again, my brother. Thanks all those who tuned in. We will see you next time.
Thank you so much. Let's do it again.
All right, bro.